Hello, I'm Malcolm Haslett.
I'm Janice Baker. How do you get over losing the love of your life?
And when you have something implanted inside your body, who knows about it but you? And you probably don't know who made the implant and what would need to be done if it needed fixing.
Whoa, this and more on Our Time.
We better keep watching. Oh, the holiday's well and truly over this week, Janice.
It is, yes.
You can't live in the past anymore.
I want some more sunshine, though.
Not at 40 degrees.
No, not
Janice has just come back after a holiday around the Mediterranean. Poor thing, back to
Woe is me.
the lovely winter weather in Australia. It's nearly over.
There you go.
Well, on this episode of Our Time, we've got two fascinating guests.
We do.
Who are they?
Well, we have journalist Nadine Williams is with us.
And Steve Soukoulis is also joining us to talk about teeth and a whole lot more. But
Right.
Nadine, how lovely for you to join us.
And with your book. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing.
She hasn't given it to you. Don't get
No, I
carried
know.
away.
No, but it's just such a beautiful cover. Look.
Well, before we look at it is a very pretty cover. You're really well known here in South Australia as a journalist.
Well, I was at the Advertiser for 20 years, so
I think you were noticed.
I hope I was noticed. I was the celebrity columnist for a couple of years, and if I wasn't beforehand, I certainly was afterwards.
Yeah.
Was that a hard gig in the vernacular to find all that sort of gossip about who's doing what to whom?
Well, it's incredible because it's actually every morning you would look at the world news, and of course the Hollywood news was what I was interested in, and I remember I once saw Kate Winslet on a Saturday morning looking fairly daggy at a bus stop. And we had to buy that photograph to put in the paper. I remember that. I had to sort of do a very hard sell to actually... But she just looked like any other person like I would look on a Saturday morning. No makeup, hair draggy, in the tracky dackies. That was a classic photo. But other than that, we would simply take the photos and then I would write words to it. And we also obviously had local news, as we have now. So that was exciting.
But I guess now Facebook is doing that a lot and taking away the gossip columnist's column in a way.
Yes.
Did you enjoy that period of your life?
It's interesting. I absolutely loved it, but if I can just say, leading into my book, I got a bit sick of it. So I went to Mel Mansell, the editor, and said, I'd like to do cultural issues, not understanding what cultural issues would be about, but...
Sounded like a good idea at the time.
But then we had the 200th anniversary of the French captain Nicolas Baudin meeting Matthew Flinders, the English captain, out from down at Victor Harbour. And so I wrote for 8 months. And at that time, I, of course, met a man called Olivier Foubert, who was head of the French community here in South Australia, and his wife was lovely. I knew his wife as well because they ran Kalesh, and then unfortunately she died, and she died very suddenly. And then I came on the scene, and I'd been on my own for 15 years. And he took me to France, which was my first book, called From France with Love. 10 years ago that was, and now this is my second book. And this is a bittersweet memoir because...
Well, before we talk about the bittersweet memoir, let's go back to the first book quickly.
Oh, yes.
Did you feel you were giving something personal away, writing about a relationship with a new partner in your life?
No.
Or was it like a diary of remembering all the good things?
Well, the interesting thing was I actually took I was a journalist, of course, and he said, would you like to come to France? He was a new widower. Of course you go to France.
Of course.
And I'd been a travel writer, so I wrote up everything I saw and did, and when I came back I actually started to write travel articles about France for the Advertiser. And so we had a big 4-page feature, and of course I got paid for these extra articles. And then the features editor at the time said, well, Nadine, we'd still like you to write some stuff for us, but we're not going to pay you now. I said, well, what am I going to do with all these wonderful people stories, all these amazing people that I had met in France? I might as well write a book. And so I did.
Good for you.
And it was a romance. I did fall in love with him in France. So that was in 2004, that trip.
Now, in truth, you had been married before.
I've been married a couple of times. I've been divorced.
But
I've been
you understood what you were getting into. But you'd been married for a long time before.
Yes, and I had children before, and I didn't mean to fall in love. And the funny thing was, I was a feminist writer, and I wrote about the romance myth, how women get sucked in. Well, of course, if I was sucked in, I was sucked into the most wonderful state.
Yes.
So From France with Love was just the story of him taking me to France and me falling in love. But this one is really our story, the story of our marriage and our reception. We had a lovely reception in France. We had a honeymoon in the Loire Valley. And then 3 years after we were married, he was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer, cancer of the bone from the prostate, so secondary cancer and no hope.
Wow.
So our retirement was over. I'd had 18 months since I'd retired from the Advertiser. So it was over, and I became his carer, and he died in 16 months. And
oh, that's so sad.
it's very sad.
Very
It isn't
sad.
what I expected.
No,
But that left you with sort of a confusion, I would say.
I wouldn't say confusion.
No?
I was lost.
Lost.
Absolutely lost. And I think what I do say when I talk at libraries is grief, when you are grieving, it makes you feel as if you've actually been kicked in the stomach by a draft horse. And you can manage that. You just cannot catch your breath. You cannot catch your feet. And that was my state. And to add to that, 2 of my children lived interstate, but my 3rd child, my son, adult children, of course, lived here. And just after Olivier died, they packed up and went to Melbourne with a new baby. And so really there was loss all around. And from this very high-profile job, which was really a fabulous job, a creative job, I suddenly found myself without my husband, who I was grieving badly for, without my son and daughter-in-law, who had been great support, and without a job to go back to.
Yeah.
And I thought there's going to be a lot of baby boomers in the next 10 years, perhaps, who are going to find themselves in this situation. And compared with our parents' generation, I mean, we don't know how to handle death or grief. I mean, my mother knew how to lay out bodies out on the farm, and the first dead body, I think, was my mother, you know. So we just are not attuned to death in any way, shape or form.
We forget the need to involve children in the ceremonies, if you like, around death. Like the Italians have the viewing at home, and it's a big thing as part of celebrating the life as soon as somebody dies. So you accept the fact, well, I'm not going to see that person again like this, and you can move on. For me, it's people being buried rather than a crematorium, because I don't know, that lowering the ground, that's what I saw as a child.
And so you're familiar with that.
Yes.
I think it was the grief that I had a lot of trouble coping with, and the feeling of loss and no identity. I was struggling with being alone, struggling with an identity.
But also for you too, the fact that you had found the love of your life.
Well, I felt cheated.
Had him only for such a short time.
Well, 4.5 years he
Yes.
died, and I've started my book on our 4th wedding anniversary. And that's a very sad part, but then also when I was writing this book, I could have written all about our wonderful, exciting time we had in France, and we had a lovely time in France. Jane and I, my girlfriend could see I was going right down the gurgler, or as I said, a vortex of grief. She said, oh, why don't you come to France, Nadine? Her name is Jane, and she lived in Sydney. And she said, we'll celebrate our 20th anniversary of our friendship. That sounded a good idea, and eventually I thought, well, yes, I will, because you are very stuck in your little world, which for me was my home in Belair. So off we went, and really, I was saying to you, Malcolm, before we started the interview that, or perhaps Janice, you kind of have to be uprooted from your feeling of comfort. You have to act, and I think travel is a wonderful way to go. I'm not saying everybody can afford to go to France, because I, of course, had a French life with Olivier. I could travel independently with my girlfriend.
But there was familiarity where you were going. I think if you go somewhere that you're familiar.
And so we travelled as independent women. But the funny part of this book is, of course, that my husband was a big man, and we had 3 courses at night. And, of course, the cheese and the wine. Everything
And what's wrong with that, I say?
Except that I went away with a girlfriend who actually didn't eat much. She was lovely and slim, and she ate an apple for lunch,
How
or
dare she?
half a baguette, and she had a gorgeous figure. And, of course, I'm a little bit rotund, a little bit like Rodin's woman,
Cuddly.
I like to say. Yes.
Cuddly's the word.
And so there were these big clashes, and I was still grieving. So there was this mixture, and friendship is a little bit like this. You need your friends, you need your family. You're not going to get over this grief thing alone. So I needed her for compassion, because I did have a few collapses, sort of really serious emotional collapses. And she was right there.
So,
And she was a good support for
She
you?
was very, very good in that respect, but we fought about food, because she left me to eat alone in Paris. And of course, a woman sitting alone in Paris at night, it's kind of like, hey,
Yes.
here I am.
did you write and you wrote this second book?
Yes.
Based on those experiences
It's
and
a
your
memoir.
feelings after the event?
And it's funny, talking about Samala Harris, Samala's a friend of mine, of course.
Yes, who's just
And
recently been on the
I
program.
asked her, would she do a review that I could put on my website, and she did. And it's interesting, however, people look at this book in different ways. I think if you're a widow, you will look on it as kind of giving you hope, and that there is a life beyond losing your spouse. But Samala saw it as a wonderful story of friendship, and how that there you were, we were in a train by ourselves, we went to Barcelona, we went up to Paris, went down to the Loire Valley, we hired a lovely young woman to take us around the Loire, just the 2 of us, a bit expensive, but it got me right out of my sadness. And I wrote all of that because I kept dying.
Well, it's obviously a book people should have a look at if they're in that situation, or just for the pure pleasure of seeing what happened.
Well, there's a bit of sex.
Yeah, well,
I
look...
mean, there's our honeymoon there, so, you know, you don't go away on a honeymoon with a French man without a little bit of, you know...
Ooh la la.
But can you just stay with us, because we have a very interesting guest coming up next to talk about implants and what they mean to people. And join us at the end of the show for a bit more of a chat.
Lovely.
And we'll be back with you in just a moment. I have a very personal question to ask you, Janice.
Oh, not again.
Have you got anything implanted?
Not that I know of.
I have.
Have you?
I have, and over several years I've needed to see different dentists and periodontists until I met this gentleman who is joining us right now, Steve Soukoulis, who is a periodontist, or specialist periodontist.
Correct, yeah, thank you very much.
Welcome to our
Welcome.
talk.
Nice to meet you again, Jan.
Have you got any implants?
I do not, sir.
Then why have I got it and you haven't? What's the point here? Steve, just so that people understand what we're talking about to begin with,
Yes, yep.
Let's have a look at some photographs that you brought in of somebody who has a problem.
Yes, so we've had a young girl who's come to see us to have a tooth replacement, and she's had an implant placed in the central incisor site.
Has she got it there?
That is there.
Oh,
you can see the little. You can see the little screw hole axis on the inside. That's where the
can.
crown is screwed into the implant, which is the component that sits in the jawbone.
This is the X-ray of
Correct.
Exactly
and you can see that shows you the 3 components. There's a screw that sits in the jawbone. There's the foundation, which is called an abutment, which is the metal bit, and then there's a crown that sits over the top of that. Mm-hmm. But as you can see in this photo, she's presented back to us after a good 12 to 24 months with a significant infection around her implants,
Wow.
which is quite concerning. And when we took the component off, we actually found out that it wasn't a genuine component, it was a copy part. And that's been one of the problems that we've had a lot in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, because lots of laboratories are creating. You can see the parts change. So if you think about what we saw before, you can see some bone now is missing on the side. There's a little dark area.
Oh, I see the little dark area.
Yeah. So that's
On the
part
right-hand
of
side,
inflammation,
yep.
correct. And you can see the gum has receded and not looking so great.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what we did, we changed her back to the genuine part, and you can see this is the other photo. You can see the response of the bone now. It's starting to come back
again.
And then when you look at the long-term result, that's getting a little bit better. But you see the long-term, that swelling has gone away. But the problem that we have is that, and then the bone is starting to mature a little bit more there. But the problem we have is that she's always going to have a little. It does look better, doesn't it? So that's a good 12 months after we put the genuine components on.
You really wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
So what you're saying is that there are different groups of people making the components for these things.
Correct.
And there are perhaps cheaper options that come from somewhere like China.
Correct.
That do connect but don't necessarily fit as well.
Correct. So when we look at the supply chain of implant dentistry, like any supply chain from paper clips to cars, there's someone that makes things, someone that sells things, and someone that uses them. So in implant dentistry, we have manufacturers that make implants. There are installers like myself who install the implants and the crowns.
I've never thought of you as an installation.
Installation. Wonderful job in your air conditioning. And then obviously the patient that receives the implants. Now what's happened the last 10 years or so is that the manufacturers, which were the larger companies previously, were just so big and so complicated, it was really difficult to copy the parts. But with improvements in technology, smaller laboratories are saying, hey, I can compete with the big guys. I'll go buy a unit and I'll mill a little crown, and I'll make a screw and all these types of things, and then I'll sell it to my customers so it's cheaper. But as with all things, you pay for what you get. And if it's cheaper, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're exactly right. It does not always fit exactly right onto the implants. And what that sometimes means, not always, but sometimes, is that the bacteria can build up around that little gap that forms that wasn't there if you were using the genuine component. And so just like you saw before on the photographs, you saw the improvement. And I had done no surgery whatsoever. It was just that we changed from the copy parts to the genuine parts, and you can see the fit so much better, and the body has responded by healing around it.
But then it's not just for teeth. It could be an implant of a hip or
exactly
anything.
Right. Yeah. And then currently there are registries. Although orthopaedic surgeons place those implants, there wasn't so much tracking in the past. And then so what a need within the profession has come to say, what are the outcomes of these implantable devices that we're putting into people? And so some very smart people, and in fact in South Australia, and his name is Professor Steve Graves, he actually started up the orthopaedic registry in Australia. So what it does, it goes around hospitals and says, Dr. X, what did you put in patient Y? And they note it down. So if the patient in the future had a complication or problem, which does occur, and with implants it's about 25 to 30% of implants at 5 years can have some small problem, sometimes it's a big problem, but they can have some problems.
Well, it's a foreign body, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
It is.
Exactly right.
But your body sort of grows around in a strange
it sometimes tries to reject it
Yep,
too.
exactly. So and then particularly with the components, if the components are not doing what they've been designed to do by the original manufacturers, you have problems.
Because it's just that tiny weeny little gap.
We're talking about microns of space that can cause problems. So what we've tried to emulate, because of course I've been in the industry for a bit of time. I'm getting a bit grayer as we go, and I see.
You're also a bit of a computer nerd as well.
I'm a computer geek. I am, and
sorry, geek. I won't use nerd anymore.
That's all right.
That makes sense.
No. And so what we've looked at is saying, okay, we're getting all these problems. Wouldn't it be nice to know what parts are in people? Because as you know, patients can move around. They can see different dentists.
Well, you can be overseas.
You can overseas. Exactly right.
Be like me and fall off a ladder.
Oh, well, that's not good. Did you fall off a ladder?
I did.
That's why all the bottom teeth are shattered. Yes,
okay.
but we haven't got there yet.
We haven't got there yet, no. And so in terms of expediency and the ease and efficiency of having patients have treatment in that situation, because each implant system has a different little screwdriver, just because your dentist says you've got an implant doesn't mean he's got the right parts. Knowing the part prior to your appointment is really helpful in sorting the problem out. So if you were overseas and you had a fall and you loosened your crown, the dentist, with what we propose to do, which is the registry, having a dental implant registry, allows the dentist to have a look and say, hey, there's the
This is
information
what-
I need.
yeah.
I know I can treat you, because in the past,
Yes.
you actually have to cut the crown off and destroy the crown and start again, or you would sometimes damage the little screw that locked the crown into place. So having that information at hand is quite important in treatment, particularly with
So you've been
complications.
instrumental in starting or getting this as a start-up thing to happen.
Sure. So we've had with another 3 other gentlemen, we've come together, and one of them was, again, he's a bit of a computer geek, or nerd, as we might call them, and we've come up with an application. It's a web-based application, so there's no software to download. You just go to a website, and it allows dental professionals and even the laboratories that make the crowns to register those components, and the patient will receive that information.
So although it's not there yet,
Yeah.
the plan
Weeks
is
away.
that
Weeks away.
Weeks away.
Weeks away. Weeks away.
So just let's get this right. So Janice and I have gone away on another cruise, and we've gone to, I don't know.
Where are we going?
I don't know. Where would you like to go? Let's go to India. I liked India.
Okay.
So we're cruising around India, and I fall down the thing, and something happens. How do we connect with this? So
Yep.
I go to a dentist or to a periodontist.
No,
there.
it's actually on your phone, so you will have access 24/7 on your phone. There's no need to speak to you. So let's give you the current state is you need to call Australia. You need to say, can I speak to Dr. X? I need my details sent to Dr. Y. What if it's a Sunday? What if it's a Saturday? And it's an emergency. So we have the software allows for you to access that information anywhere in the world 24/7. The dentist, say you're not computer savvy, you don't have a smartphone, and you're not into the systems, what you would then do is then say to the dentist, can you go onto the registry and request that information? And that information's there, but the patient has to say yes. So we always comply with patient privacy. You can't be sending
you're
information
making sure-
willy-nilly. It's really
yeah.
important that the patient's privacy is
all the
is
steps
attended
are in the right place to make that happen.
to. Correct, yeah.
Now, this basically applies now to everything. Well, it will apply
Well, eventually,
to
so
virtually
our
everything.
goal eventually is that we work with some of the registries in place to allow for patients to have that access. Because again, travelling around the world, you're living in Melbourne one day, you're in Perth another, and particularly we also work with Defence Forces, and so we get lots of Defence members moving around Australia.
Yeah, so you don't even think in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So it would be quite critical for those Defence members to have that information, because I get Defence members from Sydney and Brisbane quite a lot because I work in Darwin, and they front up and they go, oh, I don't know what I've got. And so we go, okay, well then we'll call somebody or write a note.
And you can't necessarily see all of that through an X-ray, I guess.
No. So the X-ray, people think that if you look at an X-ray, you can identify the implants. At the moment, there are 400 companies that make implants, and they make over 8,000 products. And now let's add all the copy parts.
Now, hang on
How
a
do
second.
you work out?
How come James Bond has got the technology to do those things and you haven't?
I don't.
What's wrong?
We're working on it. We're working on it.
So how long have you been trying to set this up? If you're saying it's weeks away.
Well, it's about 2.5 years.
Yeah,
We've been working on it quite a long time, and
Certainly
we've been
as
lucky
long as
enough
I've known you, because when I saw you first, you were talking about this.
That's right, yeah. And we've been lucky enough that we had gone out overseas for some of the stuff we were doing, and we found it a bit difficult, so we've moved back to Australia. And in fact, all the companies in South Australia are working with us, and they've been fantastic. So we're supporting local
Fantastic.
local
Look,
companies.
stay with us.
Sure.
Because we'll be back in a tick, and Nadine will be back, and we'll have another chat before we leave you on this episode of
Our Time.
Whoever has loved knows all that life contains of sorrow and joy. Have you loved?
I love.
Oh, you still love. Nadine, this is your book, and it's called?
Farewell, My French Love. And you've just read I think it's a verse from the French novelist George Sand, and it sums up my book. It really is it's a love story. It's a love story of my husband, my French husband, and myself. But it's also the story of how I coped when I lost him. And in that, I think it's a book of its time, actually, for baby boomer women and men.
Nice size read as well for those who are challenged with glasses. Is that something that should also happen? Do you think, Steve? Should there be a register of the things?
Absolutely. Anything that is implantable into your body.
Well, they're not implantable, but
Are you sorry? What are you talking about?
Glasses.
Glasses. Well,
Yes.
there's a script. Absolutely. So you
Yes.
can have a script for your glasses.
and there isn't a bank for that either, is
Not
there?
at all. So we have thought about that. You're ahead of your time, sir.
I know.
As always.
What can I say? What can I say? It's been great having you both on the program, both with completely different stories, and hopefully for people that find themselves in your position in the future can either read something like this to realise there's light at the other end
That's
of the
right.
tunnel.
Yeah.
New life.
New life, that's an interesting thing. For somebody who's lived alone all of his life, I don't know the other side. I know. Take me away from all this. And Steve, good luck with what
you
the
very much,
future will
Duncan.
be with this, because
appreciate it.
and it'd be great to be updated as time goes on too.
Definitely. No, it's a world first.
Fantastic. And don't forget, you can find us on Facebook, and you can also send us an email. And also, we'd love to hear from you what you'd like to see on our time. When next we see you, keep yourself nice till then.
Bye for now.